charge.
For a little while, yes. Okay, thank you so much again for coming. And I hope you guys enjoyed the film.
That's not the right word.
Appreciated. Yeah, it was. Hope you guys were able to kind of, dry your eyes a little bit, refresh yourself. And so this next part of the program is going to be a discussion led by Dr. Rabab. She's gonna walk you through a little story of hers and also lead a little bit of a discussion. You're in for a treat if you've never experienced her before. This is gonna be wonderful. So I'm gonna just leave it there. Everyone, give it up for Dr. Rabab.
Good evening, and I always begin, I know Hadil did it, but I also reaffirm that we are meeting on, no, because there is two, are you hearing me? Yeah. Okay. Because it still starts echoing. On stolen indigenous people's land of the Lenape Nation, that supporting land back and repatriation and rematriation of people to their land, not only acknowledging that we are on those lands, just like we support the right of Palestinian people to self-determination, return to their lands, and also taking and sitting with the many thousands and millions of martyrs of people who have fallen recently in Gaza, in Palestine, in Lebanon, but also throughout the world, from the time of various genocides to the time of the Mid-Passage, to the time of various people who have died for freedom in many parts of the world. I show this documentary a lot in almost every class I teach. I didn't show it this semester, but it's continues affecting me on many levels, which I will talk a little bit about that. My own personal, because I know most of the characters in the film. But let me first start by saying a couple of words about the director, May Masri. She's a Palestinian woman who is from my hometown, Nablus. And the partner who worked with her, Jean Shamon, he passed, was a very good friend of ours, a huge loss to the documentary directing of the Arab world and to the movement, and especially to the Lebanese national movement that always had the back of the Palestinians in Lebanon. Jean came out of a Christian family in Lebanon and was one of the main artists in the civil war in Lebanon, supportive, standing against the sectarian politics in Lebanon. He and Ziad Rahbani, people may know who Ziad Rahbani is, the son of Fairuz, the very well-known singer, and they used to have a radio show for 1 hour commenting on political, social affairs and so on, and some people will bring the cassettes from Lebanon. We will hear them because we also will learn a lot about what was going on in Lebanon. He made many documentaries, and he showed actually some of them here in Lincoln Center. Very fierce, very huge loss to the movement. So they both have worked together. This, as you see, of this documentary, May has a lot. And she has another documentary on Shatila, the children of Shatila. But I find this one actually much more optimistic than the other one. The one on Shatila is very sad. This one is much more optimistic if you compare it to the other one. But it's also, given the context that we're living in today, and the various issues that they bring up, they'll talk about refugees. They will talk about the camps. For example, when Manar from the Haitian refugee camps, which is near Bethlehem, talks about going to the village of Safuriya, which is the village of Muna, who is in Lebanon, to go visit the village of her friend. She talks about going from in Haiti to Bethlehem, to Ramallah, to Jerusalem, to Nablus, to Tulkarem, to Jenin, and then to Nazareth, and you see all the names of the camps that you have been hearing about now. This camp has been attacked, this city has been attacked, these martyrs have been fallen. Every single day they are in the news. You hear them more and more and more. And this is not even talking about Gaza. We're just talking about what's going on in the West Bank. You will see what's going on in South Lebanon, and people are still fixing their homes, and they are still being bombed every single day. Even though there is ceasefire, it hasn't stopped. So it's very much what was going on, what's happening today. And I think I want to also try to say something so we can also discuss, connect the past with the present. There is a lot of things that are, it's also one of the things that this documentary does, and maybe we can also discuss it, is how to tell a story. There are many ways to tell a story, and to what is the story of the Palestinian refugees here through children's eyes, through certain events that have happened. What happens to them? What do they do? There are many adults, but it's centered through the children's eyes and what's going on. And obviously, it's not spontaneous. This is not spontaneous. They put together the bus. They put together how they organize with each other, how they come with each other, and I can share with you how did they come together. But there is a lot of history also embedded in it. So much history about what happened to the villages that were erased. How you see the village when the grandfather of Manar takes her, but then you see what's left is a few little stones, and then there is a cactus. You know, there is a cactus, and everybody says that if you, over 532 villages at least now have been documented to have been completely erased. And there is Hebrew names, so there is no more Arabic names. So if you don't know, you wouldn't know what they are. And I was looking the other day, I was invited to a panel about a Korean massacre. Next week will be the anniversary, Nyang massacre. And I was looking for the land that my dad always told me that I wanted to study in the US and go back as an agricultural engineer. Our land is Zar'in. In 1967, when Israel occupied the West Bank, we got all in the car, so he would show us where Zar'in is. And I looked at the map. There is no Zar'in anymore. The whole village was completely depopulated, and it was done by the Golani Brigade, which you hear it a lot now today, the Golani Brigade, both in the south of Lebanon and in Gaza. So there is a lot of things that we see, and they symbolize what's going on, what's happening with the displacement, what's happening with people leaving from one place to another. Sometimes you hear names of families that you see them in another documentary, and you will know, you'll connect. And we will do more documentaries that actually focus on a particular village, particular area, particular story that shed light on other parts. And I think they might be like slices, but slices do tell. Put together, they're a composite of different things. That is some of the, and also when they talk about the villages that have been displaced, they say that the village, when Manar tells Muna, your village, they cut off all the trees and they put trees in its place. But the trees that you see are all European trees. They get rid of the indigenous trees and they put European trees in its place to erase even the indigenous landscape, the agriculture, the environment that's indigenous to the region, and then they place European ones, which are not, they don't always grow well, and sometimes there's a lot of fires that happen, in order to show that the Zionist project actually made the desert bloom. I mean, you know, so it's like, it's something it's not just a slogan, it's actually in action. It's realization of things you know, this case. There is a lot of discussion about conditions of Palestinian refugees in the West Bank and Gaza. With this one, that time we don't talk about Gaza, but we know in Gaza at least 70% of the population is refugee. And in Lebanon, there is at least, most of the Palestinian population is refugees. We know that, like, and we don't know how many altogether. But now also there is the fear of UNRWA being completely destroyed. And we hear Muna talking about her friend Samar, that they destroyed the ID card, because if they didn't destroy the ID card, they could not ask for asylum to go to England. If you have an ID card, UNRWA ID card, because that's the only way, and the ID card is the one that gives you the opportunity to be able to just receive rations. When people became refugees in 1948 and were in tents, like the tents now we see in Gaza, they will get sugar, rice, flour, few rations, and so on. And people have a lot of tensions around it. Palestinians don't even like to say, we receive ration. They don't like it. I mean, it's kind of representation of losing everything. You don't have anything, so you receive that. So there is symbolization. But at Haysha Ibda, the center in Haysha, actually did something that maybe next time or maybe in another discussion, they did in the 50th anniversary of Nakba in 1998. I was in Palestine doing my field research, and they did a big calendar in plastic and made in the shape of of ID card, and then they said the name refugee, number 800,000, which is the number of the my family 8, and the 9th will be coming next summer. And this is actually a reading of a poem by Mahmoud Darwish that is called Identity Card. Mahmoud Darwish, the late Palestinian poet. So a lot of the things symbols. So if you know where it is, you will start recognizing it. When the kids get into the bus, they're actually singing the Palestinian song, Onadikum, which means we call upon you. And it's a song, it comes from the poem, and I think we spoke about it maybe on the Day of the Land, but seems a long time ago, written by Tawfiq Zayyad, the also late Palestinian poet who was the mayor of Nazareth. And it talks about, I call upon you, I kiss the land under your feet. And this is written on behalf of Palestinians in the 48 areas to the Palestinians that are outside in exile. And it kind of like talks about how the relationship between the two, because there is always the description of Palestinians, there is the inside and the outside, and sort of like divide and rule. But the way that Tawfiq Zayyad is writing it, he's right of saying, talking about it in a yearning way, the same way we saw how the children and the families, and the children, there is a barbed wire, and they're actually collecting dirt from one side of the barbed wire. It's the same barbed wire, the same dirt, but they are, because one side is supposed to be Palestine, one side is Lebanon, but they're still thinking of it. And we've seen it so many times, you know, just kind of like Mahmoud Halime, one of the kids says, one part of me was pure, one part of me was taboo. There's it's kind of like the imaginary where the colonial boundaries are there. So there is a lot of symbolism, but symbolism represent material reality. And I think this is sort of, you don't have to say everything, name it, but it represents certain things that we don't. Every time, I said, every time I teach this course, a lot of things come up. The film also talks about a particular period. It talks about 2000 specifically, before, and since May 25th, 2000, this is when south of Lebanon was liberated, and Israeli military had to withdraw. Actually, this was the first victory by any Arab grassroots movement against Israel. No, I mean, even the 1973 October War was spontaneous, and then people say the Arab governments, Syria and Egypt, won against Israel, and Israel is lamenting that it wasn't prepared and so on. But then the agreement, the truce and the armistice and so on did not really produce much for the Arabs. But this was just a big struggle in the south of Lebanon, that Israel has occupied a lot of south of Lebanon, set up a quasi-regime, Southern Lebanese army, set up a prison, Khiyam, where they tortured many people. You know, a lot of stories are known by women and men, and which we can talk about them, you know, another time. And it was all occupied areas. It was just military occupation. And actually, Israel had to withdraw completely, and had to withdraw so May 25th. 2000 is the day of liberation. It was like, so it was a very important. So this is when Palestinians and Lebanese can go visit Fatima's Gate. And you see the difference between the first visit, where they're getting very close, The second visit, where the Israeli military is already policing the border, and people are not getting closer. And when we went, and I'll say not a few months later, it was very difficult to actually get closer. They're having 2 barbed wires. You couldn't get very close. So, but that was a very important in allowing. So there was, the minute there was this liberation, they organized Ibda, the center in Dheisha, and several centers in Shatila. They mentioned Beit Atfal al-Sumud, which hosted us in the 40th anniversary of the massacre, Sabra and Shatila massacre in 222, when they did the 40th anniversary, Beit Atfal al-Sumud, the children of the house of the children of steadfastness, that was created in 1976 after Tel Zatar camp was completely wiped out, finished, was created by the General Union of Palestinian Women to take care of whoever has been orphaned, lost their families in Tel Zatar, because there is no more. It doesn't exist. The camp itself doesn't exist anymore, nothing. And so, so they created it, and now it's running. There has, in every camp, there is Beit Atfal al-Sumud, and there is, the kids, there is orchestras, they sing, they learn, they have mentoring and tutoring after classes. They have embroidery. They have older people have, like, they make food, which is really delicious. And then they have all sorts of things. Vocational training is incredible. And then they talk about another group, which I'll mention. They talk with all the organization, and the meeting where they have the table, that's Jannah, which is another Palestinian organization, arts group. They come together and they organize together, and they actually set up the collaboration with the organization. So this was not something that May Masri did on her own outside of the organizations in the camp. So if you want to go to a camp, I mean, you could go, because there are no borders. You can just walk in. But this was very much in coordination with the leadership of organizations in the principled way of how you would do it. And so I think that is really important. I just want to say also some things about my own relationship. I went first to Shatila. I've known about Shatila since '82, and actually it was the main reason why I dropped out of school and became an organizer. A lot of people know this story, but I can't get into it now. Wait for my book. Probably next year it will be ready. I mean, I can say, but it's a lot. Okay, so I dropped out of school and became an organizer because it was like really shocking to me. But I went, and so I was following all the details. We were commemorating it every year. But in 2000, I had finished my PhD, and I was going to do a second part after I finished the PhD, which was about what's happening to movements within anti-colonial liberation movements in colonial context and the so-called post-colonial, Oslo. And I wasn't enamored by Oslo and so on. But I said, I wanted to ask another question. So after the so-called post-colonial, how do refugees who were completely dealt out of this question of the process, how do they feel about their identity, about their belonging to the movement, and so on? So I went to Beirut on February 7th. 2001. I was teaching at the American University in Cairo at the time, and I had arranged with Dr. Rosemary Sayegh and many people in Beirut, how do I go to the camp? I'm not going to go by myself. And we arrived, Haim and I, at the Kuwaiti embassy. Kuwaiti embassy was the place where Sharon military were positioned, and that's where they turned on the floodlights to enable the killing. You know, where the Lebanese right-wingers started killing with the silencers, with knives, with the chops, and so on and so forth, the people in Shatila. We got to the Kuwaiti embassy, and we met a Palestinian leader from the camp. His name is Abu Mujahid. So he meets us there because we did not believe that we should go without somebody who's actually taking us. So he meets us and he says, why is everybody coming today to the camp? Why is everybody interested? And he said, what is this? The media is interested. I said, oh, no, I'm not media. I'm actually doing research, and I've met Palestinian in refugee camps near Nablus. I went to Dheisheh. I went to many refugee camps, throughout the West Bank, and I had gone to Gaza. Did interviews, and I'm doing more in Lebanon now because I can travel from Cairo to Lebanon and to Syria, because when I was in the West Bank, if I go through Jordan, Syria would not let me go. They turned me back many times. They said, you're coming from the enemy land. So I couldn't do any interviews in Syria and Lebanon. Now I can, coming from Cairo. So, and then he said, because that day it was the elections of Sharon. Sharon had become prime minister that day. I said, no. This is the day when I'm in Lebanon, because there was a conference and I had made the arrangements. So he takes me to a home of a leader in Shatila by the name of Nuhad Hamad, who was the leader of Najda Association, a women's social organization, and to talk with her. And then she tells us to go downstairs because there is the kids talking. They have a birthday. And it turns out these kids. A whole bunch of them. And the kid, Rabi', whose names are always shining, and he's asking questions, and he's dancing, and, he sits next to me, and he says, maybe 8 years old. 8 years, he said, let's meet each other. I'm like, who the hell are you? I'm like, I'm older than your mother or something. And I said, okay, so, politely, Palestinian kid. So I said who I am, and I said, okay, so what do you want to do when you grow up? Trying to change to him, to get him to do. So, grow up? What am I going to do? Palestinians can't have 72 professions in Lebanon. They are banned. This is what's going on because we are refugees and so on. I said, slow down. I'm Palestinian. I'm a scholar, but I'm also an activist. Okay. I'm, trying to talk to you. Anyway, we talk with all the kids, and so we become really good friends. I said, oh, you're going to come and you're never going to come back. I said, okay, you can say that, but try me. You see how I am. So we became very, friends with the kids, and then we kept going back. And we started, one of the things I started doing is interview the survivors of the massacre. So we interviewed 55 survivors of the massacre with a graduate student of mine from Cairo, Rabab. It was very painful, of course. The whole process of research was very painful. But we kept going to several times, and we recreated the trip. So we'll go with the students, the kids, to the south. We meet them, we get on the buses. Of course, we covered all the expenses from the research, and we go together, and we got to know Farah, who's like she has the what do you call it, the birthmark here. I was fascinated with the name of Omnia, which is Omnia every time the name for her. Rabia, the kids who were there talking about who's gonna get engaged to what and so on. Muna is Rabia's cousin, and they're both from Safuriya. I'm from Zarura family, which is actually one of the biggest families in the camp. And their grandfather, that Rabia says, my grandfather is Abu Salim, I think he said. Abu Salim Zarura is from Safuriya. And he says this is, it's a big family. And they're from Safuriya, which is no longer, it doesn't exist anymore, Safuriya. It's now Zeporia, is a Hebrew name. And so their cousins. Muna actually became a doctor. She became a doctor. Rabia, every time we went to Lebanon, met us. Like one time we got to Lebanon and we haven't even had the chance to unpack. And somebody calls us from the hotel lobby and says, Doctora, you get to Lebanon, you don't call us? And I was like, and I said, where are you? I'm in the lobby of the hotel. I said, you didn't go to school today? I mean, we became really close, like with their family and so on. I said, no, I came with an older guy. The guy is 17 years old. I'm like, why did you? Anyway, so that's a kind of relationship. And we went with them to a restaurant nearby in Hamra, in Lebanon, which we used to go to all the time. And you will see now the different treatment of Palestinians in Lebanon than Palestinians from Palestine, because I have a different accent. And the two kids have a Lebanese Palestinian accent. And there was also, you see the difference. Now, not everybody does that, but there is overall this whole treatment about the foreigners, which is also displayed against Syrian refugees and so on, which is really odd because over 20 million of Lebanese are exiled. But this is how when the government, when there is let's say dominant discourse that encourages xenophobia, people start practicing it. You see it, sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't, because sometimes we go and everybody says they welcome Palestinians and they're very happy, and Lebanese and Palestinians from the camps and so on. Otherwise, Palestinians would not have survived in Lebanon. But there also that you see all of these treatment. But we went several times, and when we came to Fatma's Gate, the kids say a lot of different stories, and they tell you the stories what is happening along the way. They talk about their dreams. They talk about what's happening to them. We come back to Shatila, like Hassan Hassanein, the young man who was martyred. There is names in the camp named after him. And so there is a lot of the stuff there that is happening. And then, and I'll talk in about a little bit about Dhesh. Let me say about Dhesh now, and then I'll go about the relationship between them. Oh yeah, and I went to Dhesh earlier on. I went to Dhesh in the mid-90s, and then I ended up going there to interview people. And that center is one of the centers. There is several centers in Palestine, in the West Bank in particular, that have these centers. The biggest center in Palestine, in Beira Ramallah, called Popular Arts Center. And the biggest group is called Al-Funun Al-Shabiya. It's huge. And the other ones, like Ibda', learned from them, and they have very professional, like they make them themselves, which you saw them here. And they either use older Palestinian music that was almost dying, and now they revive it and they tour. It's beautiful. It costs a lot of money to tour them, and half of the kids are in and out of prison all the time. But it's gorgeous. But then the centers themselves had inside them, they have, and if anybody goes to Palestine should go and check them out, because Israel banned drawing anything graffiti outside. They have inside murals drawn on the walls. And the way the murals were drawn is that there were 4 anti-Zionist Jewish artists after the Intifada of the Stone, which is, people call it the first Intifada, went to Palestine, and actually one of them co-painted this mural, and another one helped us obtain the other one that says Sisters in Struggle. And they're still like working. They painted the Women's Center in San Francisco, taught a class at our center, and so on. They went and they painted with the Palestinians murals inside Ibda' and inside the Popular Arts Center, and drew a beautiful mural in Silwan, which is now Israel is destroying the homes. It's called I Witness Silwan. And I means an eye, and means I, and shows that we are witnessing. Gorgeous, beautiful murals. If you're interested, we have an open classroom on Ahmed or Teaching Palestine YouTube, and we hosted in the summer. We hosted one of the organizers and the artists, and it is, I think it's the open classroom is called. It's under Erasure, because we brought people from Grenfell, from London, where the fire happened. We talked about the erasure of people on indigenous land. So we connected multiple things. So you'll see the presentation connecting things about Harlem, how Harlem, got displaced with Robin Kelly. Anyway, it's all available. If you can actually watch it, you can do closed captioning, stop and go. But so there is several murals. But let me focus about Ibda'. So inside Ibda' you go and you see, as you're walking up and down the stairs, all the walls, because Popular Arts Center has bigger space. So the thing is painted inside. And you go in Ibda', they have stairs and smaller halls. So every single space is used. So you have paintings, for example, like on the ceiling, they have keys. Keys have many names of Palestinian villages and so on. Another place has all the refugee camps. Some places have, like outside, on the walls, they have Najil Ali, the Palestinian cartoonist, who drew Handala all the way. So when we went, for example, on the prisoner delegation in 2016, and Emery Douglas the Minister of Culture of the Black Panthers and culture editor of the Black Panther Journal, was like fascinated because there's a lot of this, all the walls are painted, but they painted inside, and you see a lot like the poetry I said, Unadikum, was in it. The poem called Enemy of the Sun that Samih al-Qasim, the late Palestinian poet, wrote, but everybody thought that it was George Jackson because they found it by his hand in his cell when he was assassinated. It's there, and it has somebody throwing, what do you call it? What do you call?
Slingshot.
Slingshot, yeah. And so they have the image of Fatima Bernawi, the Palestinian prisoner. All of these images are there. It's gorgeous. It's really beautiful. So that's inside Ibda', and Ibda' means creativity. So they have all these things. So this is like, it's really beautiful. All sorts of programs and so on. And it's in Dheche. And Dheche, the minute you enter it, there is a huge Palestinian map made in stone. And Dheche was, and Manar's father, he actually was a journalist who was inside and outside prison, revolving door again. So all of the young women, Mona and Samar, and all of them, their families were in and out, also martyred and so on. And so we kept going back and forth. So we became very good friends. I know a lot of people in Ibda', and we went there with the women, indigenous and women feminist delegation, the prisoner delegation. We met it every time we have a chance. And now actually the director is in prison. He was arrested last month. This is the same. When Mona says, we look at the names, did we recognize, like I recognize names of families that have been martyred in Gaza and so on. But for this, I was in Cairo, so I would go a lot to Palestine. It's very easy for me to get to Palestine and cheap. And I go to Lebanon and Syria. So we became very good friends, so they started asking me to carry letters. So they will give me these letters. They have the perfume on it, glitter. I mean, all of these letters. So I'll take them, from Beirut to Cairo, and then I'll take them from Cairo to Palestine, and then either I go myself or get them. I say, is anybody going to Bethlehem? Can you get them there? And they'll get them. Of course, the kids are very happy. But then I said, what do you want? What would you like me to bring you from Palestine? And they said, bring us dirt. Okay, so I would, and my mom even like, why you bringing dirt? I'm like, Mama, this is what they asked for. This is what I'm going to bring. And also, even the kid who was the custodian of the building in Cairo also wanted, wants dirt from Palestine, nothing else, only dirt from Palestine. But I also brought, my mom had lemon trees, orange trees, so I will take some. And when I went to Lebanon, we have lemon, so we were taking a trip to the south, and they took the lemon and they started cutting it, and they ate the lemon inside, and they ate even the rind. And one of the kids said that I want to eat it though, so it will stay inside me. I mean, it was like all of these things that were happening. And it's very hard as a researcher, as a scholar, to kind of maintain any kind of distance when it's like young kids who are so cute, who you want to like carry them and hug them, and I did that, many times. And also, they will discuss with you the history from begin, and they'll ask you questions about what's going on and say, what the hell with this America? If they are really democratic, how come they keep electing these people? I mean, they knew, they were following everything. They were following everything on Palestine. They were talking, this was also the Aqsa Intifada that has started. And so both sets of kids they were speaking about it. So I think this is that it keeps raising questions about what do we think about how do we do research, how do we tell the story, how do we shift the discourse about the story, how do we see young people in the refugee camps as also people. And when we think of refugees, we acknowledge the fact that people have been displaced from their land, have been uprooted, have had nothing, and at the same time, we do not think of them as inferior. So there is one thing is to acknowledge how much injustice have been committed, and on the other side also not to think of them as less than, because of the situation that they've been through. And this is very difficult to kind of see the two. It's very, and same here also. But how do you think of victims without rendering them always in the victims I mean, realize the pain, the suffering, and so on, and recognize that and express solidarity and sympathy, but also not always rendering only in victimhood that don't have any agency, cannot speak for themselves. It's very, very difficult. It's very rough thing to do that, and especially when you're talking with people who are in solidarity. It's very difficult because it's kind of like sometimes we say, is a good Palestinian, is a dead Palestinian, because they can't speak for themselves. So in this way, you see that sometimes you forget how you forget about, because they're so cute and they're talking to each other and they're exercising their agency and they're speaking. Sometimes they're being politically correct, sometimes they're not, but they're human beings, right? You haven't even seen their families. You haven't even seen the cemeteries, because you visit the cemeteries. You haven't seen all the, I mean, we see here every day, every camp has been hit with all the Israeli bombing in the Lebanon up to Beirut, right? I mean, they even reached Badawi camp all the way in the north, near Tripoli. So, but sometimes you'll forget when you see them talking and so on, and we don't know the whole picture. So one of the things that I'm thinking about is like, how do we deal with all of this reality? And we see it, and my position is that we do both. We do both, because we also need to understand people, as individuals and as collective. And this is part of the Palestinian history that sheds light on the rest of the Palestine. And I'm going to stop so we can have conversation and discussion and yeah.
Okay, so we can start Q&A, and feel free to speak on a mic, but if you felt like you want a mic because you can't speak loud, ask
Yeah, just
people
speak
if you're
louder
ready.
than Hadil. I have a
Obviously.
hearing problem.
Professor Rabab always commented on like I speak low, so if you wanted a mic, just let me know. I'll be here. If you don't, just make sure everybody hears you. Yeah. It could be questions, reflections on the
Comment, yeah,
movie,
yeah.
anything you have in your mind.
Yes, please say your name.
Hi, my name is Isabella. I couldn't help but notice the similarity between the displacement of the Lenape and the displacement of Palestinians. It's something that I've been noticing for a while. I read a book at work. It was produced by the Lenape Center, and it talks very specifically, and I was wondering if you had any experiences yourself talking to people in refugee camps or being Palestinian yourself, with settlers' use of animals and like particularly hogs as a way to get
You said settler?
settlers using animals or
Oh.
like hogs to get people to destroy Palestinian farms. When I was writing my thesis, I interviewed my friend who's Palestinian, and he said that he has a very distinct memory of waking up to the sound of like squealing hogs, because the Israeli settlers would bring these invasive hogs. And if you've ever met a pig, or if you ever seen a wild hog, they're actually a big problem in the States. They are very difficult to get rid of. And that is actually something that was used by the Dutch and then the English settlers to displace the Lenape from this land. So I wanted to ask if you have heard of or experienced similar settler violence. And I just wanted to make the connection between the land that we're on currently and Palestine.
Yeah, I'll just tell you about, actually in 2011, when we were on the Indigenous and Feminists of Color delegation, the second day, yeah, Friday, we had the first day in the morning we got to meet each other, and then the afternoon we went to a Palestinian village, not very far from, and which was attacked by hogs because they wanted to displace people from their land so they can take over the land, because the settlers did not have a permission yet to set up a quote-unquote legal, as if legal and illegal, it's all settler colonialism anyway. But they didn't have, so they set up the hogs, and we actually went into the home of a woman whose children, the hogs. It's really weird because Jews, like Muslims, are not supposed to get close to pigs. I mean, it's haram. It's not kosher. But I don't know what's going on. But it's not only that. We also went to visit the wall next to Jenin, and also there the hugs are being used. Now they are being also used against prisoners. They let the hugs, either hugs or wild dogs, to go. I mean, there is so much use of hugs. There is use of other things too. And I don't know where this comes from. I mean, maybe it must be kind of, collaboration, because there is a lot of references in the Zionist history to the treatment. Jabotinsky talks about the Sui, and there's a lot of references, even from the 17th century, of the not mercenaries, the missionaries, or they didn't call themselves missionaries at the time, the Christian Europeans who go to the Holy Land and they write their impressions and so on. But there is a lot of it, and some of them write in sort of like the Orientalist thing. This is like this magical, Alibaba and land. Not land, space, imaginary. And some of them talk about the natives who are barbarians and so on. And some of them talk about like as if non-existence, or some of them will talk about the camels and the dogs. It is very few, very, very, very few, and I haven't seen that it's like human beings, like matter of fact, what's going on. But there is all of like, where does this come? There is a lot of references. So when you need to use violence, colonial violence, to accomplish certain goals, it's a history, it's not something that I'm making up. You'll use certain things that you believe you have more access to technologies of settler colonialism that will give you an edge in order to destroy the obstacles that stand between you and accomplishing the goals of settler colonialism. Erasure of the obstacles, including human obstacles, that are standing between you and accomplishing your project. I mean, this is it, and the destruction of it doesn't really matter because it's blocking your accomplishment. So it happens, I mean, when you think about, I don't know as much about the history of Lenape, actually. I know more about Ohlone, because I'm teaching San Francisco Bay Area. I know a lot about the Trail of Tears. There are certain things that I studied more than others, but it's everything. It's very infuriating. And in other part of the world too. I mean, the way the settler colonial project, this is what it is. And then it uses and I think it's really important to learn about all of these things, and the environmental also damage as well. Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to say that
Name?
my name is Michael. I'm from here, from White Plains.
Okay, please speak one word
sorry.
at a time.
No, I just wanted to say that last year I saw a really interesting documentary at the Palestinian Center in Clifton. It was called The Native and the Refugee, and it was this film crew that they went to Lebanon, and they went to Daisha, and they went to all of these different places, and basically were making comparisons with video that they took also from interviews on Native American reservations. And it was really interesting to see sort of the parallel. It just reminded me.
Thank you for the resource. Because I'm looking for more documentaries for my classes for next year. Yes, please, yes, because I'm teaching Palestine class next semester. So
An unrelated question. Current events, Syria, if you have any opinion about what's going on.
Okay, I'm going to tell you very general, because somebody asked me. So first of all, I'm horrified by what's going on, by the toll, by the loss of lives and so on. Secondly, I believe I have no support for Bashar al-Assad and the violations of human rights and democracy. And I think historically, his regime similar to Saddam Hussein. Internally, there is a lot of dictatorship, a lot of violations of rights, of opposition, and don't tolerate anybody who kind of like stand-ups and so on. This is the way the parties have been set up. I mean, this is what they are. It's not that they grow into. Before Ba'ath became in power, okay, but then when they became in power, this is what they did in their coalitions with the communist parties and so on. They like to have monopoly on power. But At the same time, their international policy has always been against, in general and in specific, against imperialism, against it, at least in talk and in practice. Although Syria has participated in US programs of rendition, has not, since Israel has started its attacks and so on, has not shot a single bullet. There were the attacks on the Golan Heights, there have been attacks on Syria, they haven't done any of it. I also think that there's a lot of groups that are fighting in Syria against the regime that are funded by the CIA and by the United States and by Israel. I mean, even this Human Rights Observatory in England, it's CIA. Everybody knows that it's CIA. They put it in the New York Times. They don't tell you who trained them. And you know, there's a lot of connections with the State Department. And Israel is benefiting a lot from it. It's also, the timing is never accidental. Never accidental. Why now? Why did it happen all of a sudden now? What's going on? And it is very opportune now to do it now when there is like a lot of places that now, remember the US has always been saying the regional balance, on what basis is the regional balance is going on. So that's really scaring me. It's very worrying me also that the Kurdish groups that are fighting Syria and are being supported by Israel is very different from the Kurdish liberation movement that historically allied itself with the Palestinians and were trained by the Palestinians historically, that the ones that Öcalan and other people were part of. And some of the people in Syria actually came out of that group too. So what is going, it's a very mixed period. And you can say theoretically, and people kind of like, we really need to organize and sit down and talk about it. It's people are so much into battle, kind of, I don't even want to say spirit mode and killing each other and so on. It's and it's sort of been dropped, all of it. The other thing I would say is that there is always exceptionalism. Nobody has ever held Sisi accountable for all the stuff that he's doing in Egypt. There is like, and then the counter-revolution, when all the Arab revolutions were happening, it was including Syria. Like, why don't you look at Saudi Arabia? All this, I mean, we don't even hear opposition because nobody can hear about it. So, and I'm not justifying what's going on. I think this, what ultimately, and I'm just a person, right? I'm an academic and a scholar. I'm not shying away. I'm part of the Arab oppositional movements. I don't support the regimes. I'm against them all. And I'm part of a different, I want to see a different vision. This is this killing us, it's killing us what needs to happen. And I don't support even nationalist regime. And I would like us to see, we deserve better. We deserve better, and we need to stop the intervention of outside forces, and we need to straighten up even the possibilities of the regimes. But Syria has not been doing a good job. This is where I'm at. So if I change, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, please.
No, I know I'm good. So hi, thank you. I'll stand up so I could see you. Thank you so much for the film. I hadn't seen it before. I thought it was really interesting, the scenes of the border, and it just really reminded me, maybe because you had mentioned it prior to the film, about the Mexico-US border. And those are like images that we see all the time in the news, how people from one side come from and the other side, and that's where the only time maybe you meet like the child of your child that left, or an uncle or an aunt, and that's the only times you get to actually see them. And it's like, oh yeah, I heard about you, but now I'm seeing you in person. So that was really
Can you just repeat the last point?
Yeah, so it's like, I've heard about you, but now I'm actually seeing you in person, and like that, like making it real. I thought that was really interesting. I think it was also really interesting to see when she went to go visit the village, and they were showing her, well, this is where this house was, and these are the markers, and look at the stuff that was left. And you can see in her face how like moving that was for her, even though these are just like stories that she was told growing up, but seeing how like physical it was, even how much like value they put in just like rocks and dirt things like that. I thought that was really interesting. That I think this documentary did a really good job of like showing why, like even in the diaspora, even in the refugees, and the letter that was written from London is like, well, they'll never forget Palestine,
Yeah.
and they keep fighting for it.
Yeah. And I was, to build on what you're saying, Maria, I'm actually looking for documentaries for my class that I'm also teaching comparative border studies, Palestine and Mexico next semester. So I'm looking for documentaries that I can like show together. They don't have to be exactly the same, but I would like to kind of like have students watch one week and maybe the second, and then do the comparative. But I also think it's very interesting because when we talk about diasporas, there are multi-layered diasporas, right? So when we're talking here, right, in Turtle Island, we think of Palestinian, the refugee camps, actually even in Haiti, they are in diaspora. They're in Palestine, but they are diasporic already because they are uprooted from where they came from. In Lebanon, it's already double because they are outside of Palestine proper and they are already in refugee dispute. But when we think about them from here, we're thinking about them all in Palestine because in the region. But actually, that's not what it is. So your imaginary goes to all these places. So even the geography of displacement changes, differs. So, and I'm saying that for two reasons. One is if you're doing an academic, intellectual work, it's the whole question about thinking about what's foreign and what's domestic, what's far, what's close. How do we think about it? It's really, really important not to dichotomize that. But also what to think about, what is it, how do we relate to, what do we think that is in our interest? What is it that we think is outside of our concern and we don't really need to worry about it? And politically, I mean, the US reaches everywhere. I mean, the US is involved all over the world, and it's even pragmatically, it's involved all over the world. But I think also for movements that are struggling in various parts of the world, I think if we don't think in terms of justice for all, and we only focus about this or that and play oppression Olympics, we are never going to accomplish anything. I mean, it doesn't work. If we don't think of people complementing each other and working with each other and supporting each other, we're not going to get anywhere with divide and rule. We're just going to allow the US and its either allies like Israel or lackeys or whatever to continue dominating. So I think it's even the way the analysis, how do we analyze things, how do we see them, it's also very important because then the question is, a documentary like this, a small number of people see it here, right? How do we get this understanding to other people? I mean, maybe some of us can maybe see if we have more libraries. Maybe we can see if we can get it to more classes. It doesn't matter what Trump and company want to do, or the before them or after them, or the Board of Ed. It doesn't. They can do whatever they want, but we have multiple spaces. We have families, and so how can we get that across? How can we get that even more institutionalized? Because they don't want it to happen, but it doesn't matter because oppressors always don't want it, but we still move. So they don't want something and we want something. We do whatever we want to do and let them try to stop it. We always try different ways, right? So we always. So I think that's, for us, we really need to think together how we do it. I'm not saying that people need to risk it, not all the time, need to risk it and subject themselves to danger. Because we care for our movements and ourselves, and we do this out of love for our communities. And two, because we really can't afford too many casualties. We can't afford any casualty, and we don't want anybody to get hurt. So we don't want to kind of have too much bravado and then basically lose all our folks and so on. It's not. It's something may be worth it to kind of make a big CD or whatever. Something is not. And everything has to be collective for the people who are leading a particular movement. But I think we need to think strategically, how do we do that? And I think sometimes we show something about another community. Like when let's say I show in my class a documentary about black liberation. And I will see like how Palestinians relate to it. It's not about Palestinians, it's about another movement of liberation. It does affect people, and I think this is something that's really important. It doesn't have to be about you. I think sometimes people see the justice through other people's struggles, maybe even clearer than it is about yourself, because sometimes our minds get a bit lazy because we're normalized about what's happening to us. But sometimes we also need to learn and discuss with each other about our own movements, because sometimes when we hear other people having a discussion, we also learn. So there is a lot of ways that we think about it pedagogically. That's not only for classroom and very advanced graduate studies. There is a lot of knowledge in the community that we need to draw upon and basically employ, and not have it all remaining in the classrooms and so on. That for us is also like really enjoyable to learn from each other, and there is power in that. So I'm really looking. I told you I'm going to harass you with the resources and so on for my class and everybody. Yeah, Manny.
So I'm actually glad you said that.
Raise your voice and speak slow.
I'm actually glad you said that about the using other struggles to be able to like understand your own a little bit more, because exactly what my comment is about to be about. So, you want me to use the mic? So, something that stuck out to me in the first time I watched it and then this time again is the maintenance of the remembrance of Palestine and the commitment to struggling for Palestine that is like built in like culturally, right? The songs that you have like 8-year-olds singing, right? And I remember learning from in other places about like some of the educational materials being, it's just so ingrained in there that they can speak so eloquently about the day that Palestine is going to be free and what their conditions are and things like that. And earlier, right before we started, you had like kind of tossed out like a quip about people like internal colonization and like some of the people, right? And so it made me think about that, because right now with the Black liberation struggle, African liberation struggle, that is actually something that we are trying to contend with building a culture that is like counter to what is being imposed on us, right? And so thinking about like the songs and the fact that they were scrambling to get like the sand and the dirt or whatever, it just kind of reminded me, it's been about like 10 years, I went to Ghana, and part of our whole experience there was going to, for those who don't know, Ghana was like one of like the final ports that you kind of leave out, like they had like slave castles, what they call slave castles, and they leave out like on the ships to come here, and that was like one of the ports to leave out, right? And so like it's become like a touristy thing or whatever, but they walk you through, give you the history, and you guys should really look it up. It's actually kind of horrifying, but when you walk through, you learn history and it like hits you, right? And so what I did was like on the way out, like I grabbed a rock and took it with me, and like some of the rest of the people on our trip like didn't understand why I took it. And like that's why I took it, like what we saw like with the dirt and stuff, like that's why I took it with me. And so like seeing like just those are like all of the thoughts that were kind of going through my head at the moment of like that kind of like remembrance and the connection, and like that is what keeps like a struggle going. That's what it keeps a movement going generation after generation. Like you don't have to restart it every single generation. And so those are some of the thoughts that were kind of flying through my head as we were watching.
I think that's really, really, it's so important. I was yesterday or the day before, there was a New York Times article about Angola, because His Highness Biden is going to Angola. So now all of a sudden the New York Times is interested, and there is only one part, and Biden is going to the point of no return in Angola. And there is nothing else about the history and what's going on, what happened in Angola, how Angola actually supported different parts of West Africa in liberation, the relationship between
from the Black Panthers.
Yeah.
And going to Angola.
Because they had a base there.
Yeah, and connection with also with Cuba, and I mean there is all this stuff that has been and the counter revolution, UNITA, and I mean there is a whole stuff that are completely out of that, and I'm just thinking that this is something, but not only that, how knowledge gets accumulated, and how it is that the knowledge that is given to us today does not get accumulated. So even you have to go back, and it's really a struggle, because if you want to teach like the course I'm almost finishing now, colonialism, imperialism, and resistance, and I want to include third world. I want to include movements in the US. I want to like do as much as possible and have the concepts running, not just case studies. The problem is that every single time I have to go back to Martin Luther King's speech, I have a dream, and talk about, it is not just about a dream. Go back, I mean, and you know how much time that takes before we get to into now. There is the whole discussion about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, that actually this whole thing about Alex Haley was not really what was going on. Alex Haley fabricated a lot of this stuff. But you know how much you have to go through until you get there? Because lots of the students, I ask them, do you know about the Chicano moratorium? Nobody knows. Do you know about Mecha? I'm like, how come you don't know it? I mean, we're here. I'm not talking about something in Palestine that you might not know. A lot of the stuff that you expected, for example, in a place like the College of Ethnic Studies, where I teach, it's not being taught. So how do you accumulate knowledge to get to the point where you can also bring up all of these things in order to, I mean, even when you know about Fanon, sometimes people know about one article, and sometimes they don't even know that Fanon was writing about Algeria. Fanon is like detached from the place that he became part of the struggle because of the people who were fighting for it. Like, so I mean, it's a big dilemma, because I think that when, this is one of the ways in which people can compare the struggles, the understanding, the histories, and learn from each other. It's just so important. And I don't know how, I don't know how we can do it. I mean, aside from how can we, because we are losing a lot of the stuff that was accomplished in the 60s. We're losing. We're at one point we were building upon it. Now we are losing a lot of the, and it's intentional, it's not accidental. So how do we retain the stuff and then build upon it? So because the 60s was really great, but a lot of the stuff in the US, at least, built upon it, was separating the foreign from the domestic, was very assimilationist Americanness, had a lot of things around the third world that needed a lot of revisiting and understanding of it. But now we are not even at that. We lost a lot of the stuff in between. Yeah.
It's funny you say that because Daruba bin Wahad always says that we are fighting battles we already won. And that's what he's trying to say is like, you know, a lot of progress was made, a lot of awareness was had, and then we just kind of lost it all and had to start over again. So.
But I think you mentioned the word intentional, and I think it's really important that we understand, like, it wasn't just like it died down, right? There was an intentionality to settler colonialism in Palestine. There's an intentionality to domestic repression in the United States and like the propping up of certain ideologies that help you facilitate what you want to get. So I just wanted to like really ground that in the conversation that we're having about how do we maintain historical lineages and historical memory to pass it on, like those children were so sure that they will free Palestine and that was their land and that was their home. So how do we as a culture and a community nurture and develop that community memory and historical lineage that's not directly related to us, right? Like not immediately, but it is part and necessary. So yeah.
I agree, 100%, yeah. Can I just add something to what she said? Is I think I was talking to Manny that and this week I showed COINTELPRO, the documentary, and then I showed the 13th the documentary. I only showed parts of it, but the part where it talks about how the development of the prison system, and then the part where the war on drugs became a war. And I mean, because the way it develops, and people think that it's always been there. And the way it develops from Nixon to Reagan, to the use of Nancy Reagan and so on, it demystifies the whole thing and shows that at one point it wasn't really there, and all of a sudden it became as if it's existed all the time, and it's a big problem. And I think once people talk about it and understand what it is, it changes a lot of the dominant discourses which historical memory that is erased intentionally, so we don't think about of these things and think about them always existing, that colonizes our own minds and makes us, deprives us of the ability to fight against them. Yeah.
It is. I don't know if it's directly related to this, but also you mentioned something at the beginning about the concept of diaspora, and how it can be multi-level. So I grew up in Jordan, and I was in a village that it's next to Al-Baqa camp, which is one of the biggest Palestinian camp in Jordan. And the documentary really connected, like it was flashback that I'm having, because there was like a UNRWA Women's Center or Youth Center that we used to go to and just do all of these activities in the library, and just like reconnected to Palestine in everything, in songs, in music, in poetry, in stories, in the books that we do. And it's like the farther you are in the diaspora, the harder it is to stay connected. However, I don't think if I never ever came to the United States, I would ever really figure out how important Palestine is, because it's like, it's a battle between who you are, but then the yearning and the longing for the need to connect to who you are, and how important this as part of your mission, part of your path, that you can do whatever you want beside that, but that will never fill up that part of you. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, but but there are some people who will look for their identity as Palestinian American or Arab American and just search for who they are to find a place for themselves in this country because it's an identity. But if you are part of like an organized collective, if you are part of a movement or something, what you're searching for recognizes collective forms of linking to the movement, to liberation. Identity is connected to liberation. Identity is not just connecting to, I eat tabbouleh and I enjoy the restaurants and I know this song or that. It's actually very much rooted in the oppression and the liberation. So, and then connected to relating to other people who are seeking also their liberation, which is very different than individualistically, I'm lost and I need to find my identity and I don't know who I am, and I'm kind of like, oh, why do people, think this? And it becomes sort of like a lot of angst and a lot of like navel gazing, rather than, but it's supposed to really liberate you to think about you are part of a bigger collective and you relate to things that were happening. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is really wonderful. Can we do some of that? No, something can do, some things we cannot do. But if you think only about yourself as an individual, it becomes actually very problematic. So for me, I think one of the ways to do it is to engage more in collective forms and talk with each other and so on. Then it doesn't become only a problem. There's like a lot of people who are diasporic, because also immigration is never a free. People always say it's not forced. Migration is always forced, always forced. It is never ever not forced. People never migrate out of their own free will. I mean, there is very small sector, but generally they don't. And then in that process, there is a lot of things that are lost. There is a lot of things that need to be negotiated. There is a lot of things that get trained and so on, depending on the certification also as well, on the structural hierarchies. So there is, in a lot of places, you are trained. When you come to the US, you are trained to be assimilated into Americanness, into becoming whatever is supposed to be the ideal, which actually doesn't exist anyway. It doesn't exist even for whatever we think is the jour schmo. It doesn't exist. But rather than thinking about that, think horizontally. Rather than think vertically with Washington as a side, you think horizontally about the other people who are part like you, who are facing similar issues, who you can actually identify with, who also have a past or a present geography that you can connect with. So I think that's where the collective actually helps, because there is the identification or not disidentification. I mean, that happens that way, that actually enriches, right?
You mentioned a point that once it was a panel with a a movie director from Gaza. His name is Muhammad. He came to New York and he commented exactly on that. He's like, you guys, even the Arab American, like you waste time, maybe years, just exploring who you are and your identity, while you just know you're Palestinian, you're Jordanian, whatever your family originated from. Just act as it. Just walk in life as it. Everywhere you go, just say it. And when you have the opportunity, fight for the cause, and you are it. There's nothing further to look for or waste time for, which is against the idea of individualism. Go to trip in the nature and just explore who you are and write about who you are for years, which is, yeah, of course, we need some of that. But then once it clicks for you, that's it. Take it and move with it, and instead of just looping in the same hole.
Hi, it's Isabella again. Sorry to take the mic again, but I wanted to connect that with a scene in the film where the kids are throwing stones and they're saying the names of their loved ones. And that really hit me because I remember there was a quote that said that, like, my politics are rooted in an unyielding love for humanity. And I really think that's at the core of working against oppressive movements, working against oppressive nations, ideologies, etc., is a love for humanity and a love for yourself and your community. And it's why it's why I wear a keffiyeh. It's why I'm able to see myself in Palestine, even though I am not Palestinian at all. And I think that once we are, and it is against that individualism that we are so taught in the United States of people being like, why do you care about something that's so far away? But that's me. That is an unyielding love for humanity. And I see it in the fact that those kids that not only are they throwing stones, but they're throwing stones for love.
If we are on our last, I just want to say that I just want to acknowledge that today is the anniversary first of the martyrdom of Rifat al-Harir. So in the spirit of remembering, and all his writing was in collective spirit, let's think of him, let's remember his poetry, let's remember what he sacrificed for, and let's never forget him or never forget what he called for.
Thank you, Dr. Rabab, for walking us through like a brain revolution in 45 minutes. Thank you all for your contribution and thoughts and sharing all of that and the tears, every single tear that fall today. So we have a little bit of a long list of announcement because, you know, we watched the movie, we watched the kids throwing stones, and actually when they were trying to reach through the gate, I just tried to imagine ourselves as a very far group of people who trying to reach through in different way. We are in the protest, we're coming here for that cause, and it's like, you know, this is opportunity to just some reminder and announcement about upcoming actions. The first thing is that we have the Maersk petition. I know most of you have heard of all of the development for arms embargo. The PYM carried this petition of this campaign and now actually was able to expose Maersk nationally. And there's serious results and effect coming along that Spain already announced that they didn't know that Maersk was carrying arms embargo, and now they know. So there's a lot of talk, and we might have arms embargo from Spain very soon, like a lot of people expecting that. So if you can help to sign this petition online, or if you prefer a written signature, we have also lists in the back, because this week they're gonna make a huge drop-off to Maersk headquarters in New York, in New Jersey, and throughout the state. And we are aiming for, I believe it's like 20,000 signature as of now. So it will be great if you can help with that. Here's the QR code. You can start doing it. So that's one. And then next week, December 14th, there is arms embargo protest. And it will be in New Jersey, because New Jersey port is where all of these ships are actually leaving with the arms, whether it's coming from shipment companies in
in New York or in New Jersey, such as Maersk, but also other ones. So we have a flyer for it in the back. And there is on Tuesday, right? This Tuesday in Bronxville, there is a screening, movie screening. They were able to have the Bronxville Theater for it, and it's for free. So good job. And you can see Diana right here, Dania, for more information on how to register, and she have the link. Another one, fundraising, January 11th. It's going to be vendor-based, and it's going to be in the Upper Westchester Islamic Center. So we want volunteers for the day of. If you have connection to any vendor, please contact them, contact me. I'll send you the Google form to sign up. And that's it. Thank you so much for Dr. Rabab again. Thank you for Shay and Imani from BAP, from Black Alliance for Peace. Hi. They've been working so hard on this movie series, and definitely our own Banupti, the technology king and videography and streaming. And also Rabab's team in the background, Laith and Lean, who also help in all of the production. One last shout out, Sarah Lawrence students who just launched. They launched their encampment last week. They lasted for 1 whole week under one of the coldest weeks that we received it, under the rain. They did an amazing job. We were able to attend, and they hosted us. So they were very welcoming. And they end up with the negotiation with their college, receiving 2 of their developments, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. And the college promised to give them a disclosure on January. So hopefully they stick to their promise, whether they did or not. You guys did it here in Bronxville, in Westchester. So shout out for you all. And I think that's it. Oh, yes, thank you. January 20th, we have in New York and we have in DC, big protest against, so we are not receiving Trump well, and we're fighting back against him and all of the things that we know about, both Democratic and Republican, but, you know, making an announced statement about it. Okay? Hope you all have a good night. Connect. The t-shirts, please check them out. They're amazing, and all of the flyers and petition.